Andy Street, thank you for joining me. You were Managing Director of John Lewis from 2007 to 2016.
Yeah.
Brilliant job. What's the biggest change you delivered while at John Lewis?
Well, Gloria, it's great to be here, and thanks for starting with something that was very, very dear to me for all those years. I guess, you talk about one change. It wasn't that. The thing I was proudest of, which might be the other way of taking your question, was that just after I left, so I never achieved it, my successor did, John Lewis was actually voted the most trusted brand in Britain in any sector at all. And that came from years and years of endeavour. And you're probably interested to know the BBC were always number one. And I could never get that top slot. I walked away and they got top slot. So I guess that was the thing. You thought if you can get to be the most trusted brand in anything, something's got to have gone okay.
And they have an interesting staff model, don't they? Employee model. Just tell us about that and whether it is something that other businesses should emulate.
Really interesting question. Should others do it? So the story is John Lewis, of course, has to compete with traditional businesses owned by the shareholders, profits for the shareholders. But the success of John Lewis is all shared with its employees. The employees are the owners. You could say it's the biggest sort of workers' cooperative in Britain. And when I was sort of being recruited, I thought this business is slightly different to others. It's sort of, it piqued my interest. And the truth is, for 30 years, I wanted to be part of this experiment. We always said it was an experiment. Could we better those other businesses by doing things differently? And I always said to my team, if you get bored of that challenge, it's time to move on. So yeah, I love the fact that we were taking on those big conventional businesses, doing it in our completely different way. And we always said the single purpose of John Lewis is the happiness of their members. So a very, very different purpose to most businesses.
What could other businesses learn from that model?
Well, people say, could it be the standard wear business? And you might remember the 2010 general election, a time interesting in your political history, of course. And Nick Clegg was talking there about the John Lewis model being the solution to what they saw then as rampant capitalism. And there was something in it actually about a fairer way of doing business, a different way of sharing rewards. And I was delighted when that model gained such currency. But it was naive to think that everyone could become a John Lewis. That's just not so. We weren't going to get huge successful PLCs suddenly pass over. But there are lots and lots of businesses structured like John Lewis, but they tend to be really small, probably two or three person businesses, and they don't grow. And the magic of John Lewis was, of course, we grew into a huge business by letting the executives get on and lead it. But we always knew we were accountable to our employees. We were doing it all for them.
So you have this brilliant job. You're speaking very passionately about it. You jack it in.
Yeah, spot on.
To be West Midlands Mayor.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
And remember, people said, there's no chance of you winning that election. People thought I was stark, staring mad to walk away from it. But there were push and pull factors. The first thing, I'd been CEO, you'd probably say, of John Lewis for 10 years nearly. And that's a long time. Most CEOs last about 2.5 years. Yeah. And I just thought very genuinely, I've done that. And there are lots of people who could do this better than me now. So I was ready to move on. But the real pull factor was David Cameron, George Osborne, then PM and Chancellor, was setting up this experiment, really, another experiment in a different way of leadership in our country, to have mayors for big places, the whole of the West Midlands, about 4 million people in population, same in Greater Manchester, same in Merseyside, same in South Yorkshire, for example, big regional places, and saying there'll be an individual who is directly elected, directly accountable. And I thought, perhaps immodestly, I can make a difference. I'd always cared for my home city, Birmingham, and I thought we could do better. And so I thought, let's have a go at this. As I say, no one gave me any chance of winning.
What's the party that you represent is the party of government. You must have had a few rows along the way because you're fighting for your people.
Oh, yes.
But central government may not want to deliver what you want them to deliver.
You are spot on. So, it's much to my regret, in a sense, that you have to stand as a party candidate, because these mayoral jobs, and I think you've seen this in the individuals who've done it around the country, and indeed when Boris was Mayor of London, it is about an individual doing a job. And I think the electorate get that, actually. But you do have to stand for a party. I'm a proud Conservative, always have been, so I was happy to do it. But right at the beginning, you talk about rows. It wasn't quite a row, but I was very clear with Theresa May, who was then the PM, we will do this our way. this campaign will be run entirely from Birmingham, not by central office, and we were going to be that little bit independent. And I've always thought in the last 5 years, my first loyalty is to the people of the West Midlands, and on occasions you have to stand up to government and say, no, that's not the best thing in our interest. Famously, during the sort of tiering thing in lockdown, you had to get out there and say, this system, this lack of support for the higher tiers isn't right. So yeah, you've got to be careful. You're Conservative, yeah, but your loyalty is to the people of the West Midlands.
And when you were elected, you became the first openly gay Metro Mayor in Britain. You're a trailblazer. Do you feel like one?
No, there were only 8 of us, so it wasn't a huge group to be a trailblazer amongst. But I was very clear, standing in a role like that, people needed to know who you were, what your values were, what makes you tick. So the fact that I was gay needed to be on the public record. So I just did it. It makes absolutely no difference to how I do my job, but people needed to know. And that was all it was. And I didn't sort of feel I was a trailblazer in any way. It's probably 30 years too late for any of that.
I read that you didn't realise you were gay until you were about 30.
Yeah, that's about right, yeah.
Can you expand on that? It struck me when I read it. I was surprised.
Well, that's just my story that I know for many people, they know when they're 5 or 6, some people say much sooner, but for me, it was much later in life, really. And I suspect, if I'm very honest, it was to do with all the normative pressures that there are as you're growing up and the things you just expect to do. But through my late 20s, I just thought, no, this isn't me. And so things changed.
And coming out was a happy experience.
Yeah, I've been very pleased that I've been very honest with people. And do you know what? Apart from in interviews like this, no one ever mentions it in my daily life. And this is, I think, a huge credit to modern Britain. It is utterly irrelevant.
You're close to Michael Fabricant MP.
Yeah.
How would you describe the relationship, the friendship?
Well, friendship is the right word. I would probably say he's my best friend. We've been friends for about 30 years, as I think he told you on this programme, actually. So about 30 years. We don't live together, to be really clear about it, but we are very close, and I know he will always be there for me and me for him, and we do lots of things together. And as he's said many times, we have this shared holiday home in West Wales where we both enjoy it, sometimes together, sometimes with respective friends. And if you're not, perhaps expand a wee bit, if you're not married with kids, you do need a different group of intense friends to provide that sort of support network. And Michael has been an intense friend for many, many years.
Who leaves the most mess when they've stayed there?
Him. No question about it.
Would you like to be a Member of Parliament?
A Member of Parliament. So interesting question, because I think this, because it makes you, it's not the first time I've been asked that. I've been asked it probably for many years, because what we didn't say in the early life, I studied PPE, the politician's degree at Oxford. How predictable. And so many of my contemporaries then went into politics in different, whether they were an MP or maybe a political commentator or something. And I see some of them now leading the way. And so many people thought I might do that. I was chairman of the Conservative Association at Oxford, but I didn't want to, and I never want to. And all the time I was in Johnny's, people kept saying to me, come on, Andy, get on with what you really want to do. And who knows, I might never have been selected. I was probably too stroppy to be selected, but I never wanted to. But when this political job came up, which is different, I jumped at it, as we said earlier, and I'm still very pleased that this is the political role I want to do. Because to be honest, this is, you've got executive power, you're responsible for things, you feel, I hope this doesn't sound too corny, but running John O'Shea, used to look at the results every year and think, how have we done? It's the same in this job. I look at the outcomes for people in the West Midlands, whether people are getting better qualifications, whether they're getting better jobs, whether incomes are going up. And I feel some responsibility for it. So I like that sort of sense of ownership of it. And that's unique to this job. It's not quite the same as an MP when you're part of a much bigger team.
You said that you did the politician's degree, the PPE at Oxford, and you were chair of the Conservative Association at Oxford. Any famous peers?
Oh, well, Boris was a bit younger than me, but he was there, and he was involved in the union famously, which I wasn't involved in. People of my background were more were less confident, I suppose, for that. And then a number. I tell you, one very famous peer, and he's a person who's loves his politics, but was never an MP, and that's Nick Robinson, of course, the voice of the Today programme. He and I were close friends at university. I've kept in touch with him since. A number of other people have become MPs from my immediate group, Jane Ellison, Richard Fuller. So all sorts of people who were in our group have gone on to that. But you know what? I always like to think I've done things slightly differently.
You mentioned your background.
Yeah.
And you said that you weren't involved in the union because of your background. What do you mean by that?
Well, quite simply that I think looking back at how you needed to be for that when you were 19, 20 or so, you had to have a degree of self-confidence that, if I'm honest, I could not have aspired to when I was that age. Maybe wrong to say it was purely background, but I think there probably is something there if you come from a very normal, average Birmingham family. You probably aren't born with that sort of self-confidence to step into that. And I think that's right. I was happier with my piece in a rather more, what you might call a more conventional, more grammar school background type approach to life. Having said that, people now say, well, where do you find your bloody confidence from? And I do believe you can learn these things through life, actually. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. Give
us a top tip on how we can be, how you can learn to be confident. Because I recognise, I relate to some of the things that you're saying about the Oxford Union. I used to get invited as an MP to debate, and I just thought, gosh, I'm not going down there. No way. So just give me a tip.
Well, you can train yourself in public speaking. I would have been terrified when I was 18 or so to do that. But you can, I mean, this is going to sound bizarre, but I had an executive coach when I became MD of John Lewis, actually, because it's not dissimilar. If you're fronting a company that it's in the public domain, I say most trusted company in Britain, everyone's got an opinion on John Lewis. Everybody, literally, just like if you're running a bank or running a football club, it's a public-facing organisation. You're the representative of it. You got to get it out there and promote it. So I did do training for it, and it literally, to some extent, involved lying on the floor and learning to breathe properly as though you're an actor. Might sound completely mad.
Really?
It involved literally learning how to present your annual accounts in an engaging way. So I am a great believer that you can be trained in some of the skills needed to be a front man, whether it be in business, in politics, or indeed probably if you're a football manager or anything else, you can learn some of these things that are required.
Interesting. Final question, probably the most political current question. We're recording this the morning after Boris Johnson has won his vote of no confidence, albeit more narrowly than some expected. Your fortunes, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, every mayor's fortune, every local MP's fortunes, it affects them. What's happening at the national level, the state of that national party. Yeah. What do you say to those who caused last night?
Well, interesting question is who's caused it. So it depends a bit what you mean. But I would say this to both sides of the debate last night, actually. Of course, what's happened in terms of number 10, Partygate, is utterly wrong. Absolutely no question about it. It has to be condemned. It's a huge surprise that it happened, and it is just completely unintelligible from someone looking on afar. But you come to the question about whether what you might call regime change is in the interests of the people you represent. And my job, as I said earlier, is to think about the interests of citizens in the West Midlands. We've had a torrid time through COVID. We're slowly rebuilding. Some of the things the government are doing are really, really important to our futures. And so I would say, think about those things. Think about the delivery of HS2, of levelling up, of the devolution deal that we're working on, investment in new jobs and skills and new industries. Those are the things that matter. Actually, is the government going to deliver on those promises? So to all Conservative MPs, I would say that's what I and my citizens are actually really, really wanting to see.
Well, your chances at the next election, are you going to stand again?
I hope so. It all depends on the will of Conservative members across the West Midlands. But as it stands at the moment, yes. And let's be honest about it. It's going to be more difficult for a Conservative candidate. But I hope And you can see this in mayoral results actually across the country. I hope my record, the way I've gone about this job, the way I've personally demonstrated my values in how I've done it, that will win through whatever the national situation.
Do you hope Boris Johnson will be the leader at the time of the next election?
That is not down to me. That is actually down to MPs and then the members of the party. What I know is I will stand on my record.
Andy Street, our first mayoral interview. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.